The grand concert hall was buzzing with excitement as the crowd took their seats, eagerly awaiting the start of the international piano competition. The air was thick with anticipation. This wasn't just any competition. It was a chance for the best pianists from around the world to showcase their skills, a chance to win the kind of fame that could change everything. It was a place where legends were made, and that's why the young girl sitting nervously in the front row of the backstage area couldn't help but feel both excitement and fear. She had been dreaming of this moment for years, practicing for countless hours, and now it was her time to show the world what she was capable of. But there was something else she was fighting against that night, something that no amount of practice or preparation could have prepared her for. She was blind. She couldn't see the grand piano in front of her, the elegant keys that promised the magic of music. All she could do was trust the feeling in her fingers, the memory of each note and the rhythm she had internalized over the years. But despite her blindness, she was determined to make her mark on the stage tonight. Her name may not have been well known yet, but she hoped this performance would change that. She hoped it would show everyone that her disability wasn't a weakness but rather a strength, something that allowed her to experience music in a way most people never could. But as much as she was focused on her performance, she couldn't ignore the whispers around her. The crowd was filled with seasoned critics, music lovers, and some of the most famous names in the piano world. One name stood out above all, a famous pianist who had the talent and reputation to intimidate anyone. His name was known far and wide. He had performed on every major stage and won numerous prestigious awards. He was a legend, and he was about to perform right before her. She had heard of him, of course. How could she not? He was considered one of the greatest pianists of his generation. But what stood out more than his talent was his arrogance. He was known for being a perfectionist, some said too much so, and for his sharp, sometimes cruel remarks about his competitors. He had a reputation for belittling others, especially those he didn't think could measure up to his standard. She had seen him earlier, laughing with his fellow competitors backstage. There was something about his confidence, no, his arrogance, that rubbed her the wrong way. He acted as if the stage, the audience, and the whole world belonged to him. He had a way of speaking that made everyone feel small in comparison. And now, she was about to face him not just in the same competition but right after his performance. He would be the one to set the bar, the one everyone would compare her to. As the competition began, the spotlight fell on him first. The crowd went silent and she could feel the energy shift in the room. She could almost sense his confidence radiating as he sat at the piano. His hands, poised and graceful, hovered over the keys before he began to play. The music that flowed from him was flawless, technical perfection. Every note was executed with precision, and every phrase was delivered with strength. The audience was mesmerized, and they showered him with applause when he finished. But even in the midst of the praise, she couldn't help but notice something. A coldness. Yes, his playing was flawless, but it didn't move her. It didn't touch her the way she had hoped music would. It was as if he was playing not from the heart, but from the mind. A display of skill, yes, but not much more than that. For a moment, she almost felt sorry for him. After all, it wasn't just the technical aspects of music that mattered. It was the feeling behind it, the soul. As the applause died down, she stood up from her seat and made her way to the stage, her steps confident but her heart racing. She tried to push aside the unease bubbling inside her, trying not to think about the fact that everyone was comparing her to him. She couldn't let that bother her. She couldn't let his fame, his reputation, or his cruel remarks shake her. She took a deep breath as she sat at the piano, her fingers brushing the keys as she adjusted her position. It was a familiar feeling, a comforting one. The piano was her sanctuary, a place where she could block out everything else and just let the music take over. Her blindness, the thing that had always set her apart from others, had never been a hindrance to her. It had only made her more connected to the music, to the vibrations and the sounds that others couldn't hear in the same way. She could feel the music deep in her bones, and that was all she needed. As her fingers began to play, the crowd fell silent. The piece she chose wasn't one of the easier ones, but it was a piece she had played countless times before. It was a song that meant something to her, a song that had carried her through many difficult moments in her life. She poured her heart into every note, letting the music speak for her in ways words never could. But as the notes floated through the air, something else happened that she hadn't expected. She heard the whispers, the quiet murmurs from the audience. She felt the judgment in the air, the uncertainty. They were probably wondering how a blind girl could possibly play such a complex piece. Could she really keep up with the best of them? Was it just some sort of sympathy performance? She heard some of the harsher words from a few critics, muttered just loud enough for her to catch. She can't even see the keys. It's a shame to let her perform at all. Her heart sank a little, but she didn't let it stop her. She couldn't. The music had already taken over her mind and her body. She couldn't afford to focus on the negativity around her. She had to finish. She had to prove that she was more than her blindness, that she was more than the doubt swirling in the room. She finished the piece, her fingers gently lifting from the keys, and the silence in the hall was deafening. For a long moment, no one moved. The audience sat frozen, unsure of what to think. Then slowly, hesitant applause started, some of it polite, some of it a little unsure. The judges nodded, but it felt more like they were just being courteous rather than genuinely impressed. She stayed seated at the piano, not moving, not trying to look at anyone. She had given it her all. That was all she could do. The whispers started again, this time a little louder, and she could feel the sting of their words like daggers in her heart. She's blind. How could she possibly play like that? This is just a pity performance. It's just not the same. Not the same as his. The harshest whisper came from the very man whose performance had just finished. A blind girl playing a piano? What a joke, her face flushed. She didn't turn to look at him, but the words stung worse than she expected. She had heard his cruel remarks backstage, but hearing them in person, knowing they were meant for her, made her want to run away and hide. It felt like the whole world was against her, laughing at her. But deep down she knew this wasn't about him. It was never about him. This was her journey, her performance, and she wasn't going to let him or anyone take that away from her. With one final deep breath, she stood up from the piano and walked off the stage. Her heart was pounding, but she knew she had done something important. The music had spoken for her, even if the world wasn't ready to hear it yet. She had to believe that. The competition wasn't over yet, and she still had a chance. She couldn't let one man's arrogance ruin the rest of her journey. She had come here to prove something, not just to others, but to herself. She wasn't done yet. As Lila walked off the stage, her steps were slow, each one echoing in her mind. She could still feel the weight of the whispers, the judgment hanging in the air. She didn't want to show it, but the sting of the audience's uncertainty and especially Sebastian's cruel words cut deeper than she had expected. She was used to being underestimated, but this felt different, more personal, more cutting. Her heart felt heavy in her chest, and for a moment she almost wanted to disappear. She wanted to run off into the shadows where no one could see her, where the cruel whispers couldn't reach her. But then, something shifted. As she walked down the backstage corridor, she heard something she hadn't expected. Applause. It wasn't thunderous or overwhelming, but it was real, sincere. A small group of people who had been sitting near the front of the hall clapped, and Lila stopped in her tracks. She turned her head slightly, not quite sure if they were applauding her or if they were just being polite. But it didn't matter. She had felt something deeper than just the usual applause that comes at the end of a performance. She could feel that they had recognized something in her performance. They had felt what she had put into it. She let the moment wash over her, and with a steadying breath, she walked further into the wings of the stage. She didn't need the approval of the entire room. The fact that a few people had truly appreciated her effort was enough. But as she entered the backstage area, there was one person she couldn't avoid, Sebastian. He was standing by the dressing rooms talking to a few of the judges. His eyes met hers as she walked past, and for a moment she thought he might ignore her, as he had done throughout the competition. But then he spoke. "Well, that was interesting," he said, his tone sharp but not entirely dismissive. "I didn't expect much, but I'll give you credit. It was brave." The word brave felt like a backhanded compliment, but Lila refused to let it faze her. She didn't need his approval. Not anymore. Before she could walk away, Sebastian continued, "I don't know what you were thinking trying to play such a complicated piece. But hey, you didn't completely embarrass yourself." His words hung in the air like a heavy weight. She could feel her fists clenching, and for a split second she wondered if she should say something, anything, back to him. But instead of reacting, she took a deep breath and turned to him. There was no point in arguing with someone who had already made up his mind. "I didn't play it for you," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I played it for myself." Sebastian looked at her, his expression shifting ever so slightly. She could tell he hadn't expected her to speak back, let alone speak with such calmness. He raised an eyebrow, the first hint of curiosity flickering behind his usual arrogance. "Do you really think you can compete with people like me?" he asked, almost as if he was challenging her. Lila didn't hesitate. "I'm not competing with you or anyone else for that matter," she said, her voice unwavering. "I'm just playing the music. It's all I've ever wanted to do." For a long moment, Sebastian just stared at her, as if her words had caught him off guard. Then, with a dismissive shrug, he turned back to the judges, muttering something under his breath. It wasn't an apology, but it was enough. Lila wasn't looking for an apology. She was looking for respect, and maybe, just maybe, she had earned a little of it. The rest of the competition moved forward, but for Lila, time seemed to slow down. She didn't know what would happen next. She wasn't even sure how much longer she could stay in the competition. But one thing was clear. She wasn't going to let Sebastian or anyone else define her. No matter how many times they tried to tell her that she was less because of her blindness, she knew she was more than that. She was more than they could ever understand. Hours passed and the competition continued with performance after performance. But Lila's mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about what she had done, not what others thought of her. She had given everything to her performance. No one could take that away from her. No matter what Sebastian or anyone else said, she had played her heart out. And that was something that couldn't be measured in applause, or criticism, or in anyone's judgment then. The moment arrived. Sebastian's second performance. Lila was backstage, her fingers resting gently on the edge of the piano as she prepared for the next round of competitors. She could hear the hushed murmurs of the audience as Sebastian made his way to the stage. His presence was undeniable. He was confident, commanding, and as he sat at the piano, Lila knew that this would be the moment where the two of them were compared, whether she liked it or not. Sebastian's fingers danced across the keys with effortless grace. The music was beautiful, technically perfect as always. He played with precision, hitting every note with the kind of exactitude that only years of practice could bring. The audience watched in awe. He was a virtuoso, a master of his craft. No one could deny that. But as Lila listened, she realized something. The music, though flawless, was cold. It lacked warmth. There was no heart in it, no soul. It was a performance, yes, but it wasn't a story. It wasn't an experience. It was a show of skill, but it didn't reach into the depths of emotion the way Lila's music had. She could feel the difference. It was like the difference between hearing a song on a surface level and feeling it in your bones. When Sebastian finished, the applause was as expected, polite, respectful, but not overwhelming. The audience was impressed but not moved, and then, as if on cue, the whispers started. "She's up next," someone murmured in the back. "The blind girl. How can she compete after that?" Lila took a deep breath. It was her time again. She had nothing to prove to anyone, least of all Sebastian. But the pressure, the nerves, they were there. Still, she had come this far. She had given everything to her performance, and now it was time for her to play again, on her terms. When Lila took her place at the piano, the audience settled into silence. She felt the weight of their eyes on her, the uncertainty in the air. They still weren't sure what to make of her. But this time she didn't care. She was beyond that. This time she was going to play for herself. And for the first time she felt no fear, only the music. Her fingers found the keys and she began. The piece she played was different. It was bold, emotional, filled with the kind of passion that only someone who truly understood music could pour into it. She didn't just play the notes. She made them sing. She made them tell a story that only she could tell. And as the last note rang out in the hall, there was a long, heavy silence. Then the applause came, louder, stronger than anything she had expected. It wasn't polite. It wasn't hesitant. It was real. Lila smiled to herself. She had done it. And in that moment she knew that no matter what happened next, she had already won.